Hi, so today, as you know, I'm a joker. I like to have fun and I'm very bubbly and I like to be chatty, and I'm always laughing and I'm always joking. But today I'm going to be telling you my testimony, which isn't all happy and, joyful. And you got to thank Jesus why I'm happy and joyful now, because life wasn't always like that. So I've just started off where this is the house where I grew up. Nice area, had a nice 4-bedroom home. Grew up with my mum and dad who were married. We did live in another house where I was born, but as far as my memory goes is to this house. We moved here when I was about 4, 5 years old. So I went to school around here. All my friends that around in my childhood lived around here. My grandparents lived in a different area and a lot of my family were darted about the West Midlands, but this is where we grew up, in this house with our mum and our dad. My mum and my dad, they weren't Christians. They were good parents, I remember running around these very gardens having snowball fights. My last garden running around having snowball fights. Life was so fun. I just remember really good memories of my younger childhood. We were always laughing, we were always joking, we went on family holidays. My parents seemed happy that we loved to party. We used to have big, massive barbecues. My parents used to have house parties. I used to love to dance. I loved music, I still do. And, this is where my love for music and dancing started, at home with my parents on, in the morning on a weekend when my parents weren't at work. We'd be dancing around the house, we'd have the music on full blast, and that was life. Fridays my aunties would come round, we'd have takeouts, life was good. We had piano lessons, we had good education, and life was great. I think up until about the age of 7, probably, yeah, up until the age of 7, life seemed pretty normal. To the point where one day I remember looking through my bedroom window, which was that window right there. And I remember looking up at the sky and saying to God, like, as a child, I wanted to be like everybody else. And a lot of my friends, I made friends with a lot of troubled children. And my life seemed boring because it was normal. We had a mum, we had a dad, we had a nan, we had a granddad. Everybody at school, they seemed to have dads that lived somewhere else with girlfriends, and they had half brothers and half sisters. And to me, that sounded really fun. Like, obviously, I was just a kid. I didn't really know like the ins and outs of how that happens. But I remember looking up at the sky and saying to God, God, I want half brothers and sisters, and I want a council house, and I want my parents to divorce, because I just wanted to be like everybody else. And which is sad to say that the norm at the age of when I was 7 was for parents to not be together and for people to have half brothers and sisters and broken down families, and but that's what seemed normal. I think there's probably about 3 kids in my class whose parents were still together. So yeah, that's what I asked for. And when I got to about 7, 8, I remember meeting my half sister. I met her when she was about 4. I didn't still understand what that meant, so I was ecstatic. I was overjoyed that I had a half sister. I was just really, really besotted with the fact I had a half sister. Loved her since the day I met her. And she was welcomed into our family. My parents were still together. Once I hit about 8, 9, I began to understand how, should I say, I began to understand how half sisters are made, and how that happens, and how that actually happened. And but I didn't really think too much of it. I was just like, oh, okay, Dad had another girlfriend and they had another baby, and oh, that's just normal. So I just thought that's okay. Compared to everyone at school, at least I fit in a bit more now. I've got a half sister. After that, I started to notice that my parents over the years were having a lot of arguments. I remember one time my mum just taking us out of the house, and we moved to my nan's house in Birmingham, which our school was nowhere near. She struggled to get us to school and things like that. And we were there for about probably about a week, from what I can remember. I remember a lot of shouting between my parents, between my aunties, shouting at my dad and stuff. But I didn't ever understand why until I got a bit older. Then when I got to about the age of 12, the arguments carried on. They still didn't stop arguing. By the time I hit the age of 13, 14, the marriage really started to break down. The arguments intensified. There's plates getting smashed up the wall. There was arguing, there was shouting, and it really became quite a nasty place to live. But me, I just used to love the juice. To be honest, I found it exciting. Most kids would probably be a bit stressed out, but I just found it exciting. And I remember I used to put the phone on intercom, and we'd put the phone under the bed so we could listen to their argument on the phone downstairs until we heard some things that we didn't want to hear, and then we never did it again. But yeah, that was our life for about 3-4 years, just arguing and things like that. And then one day my mum took us to another area, and she said, we're going to be moving here. So we was just like, yeah, new house. I was excited, like, yes, this is great, this is what I've always wanted, my parents to be in different houses. Now I'm going to get spoilt by both of them. I'm going to have 2 bedrooms, I'm going to have, and you know, just very naive in the way that I looked at the situation. And it wasn't until we actually came home from school one day and everything was being packed into the back of the van, and my mum turned around and said to us, we're moving today, where, you know, reality hit me. I think like a few weeks before that, we started to see police cars outside the house. We started to see arguing. We didn't really know what was going on, but we knew whatever was happening was quite bad. Dad had left home at one point, and we heard that he'd had a new girlfriend, and he was leaving us, he was leaving my mum. But they got back together and everything seemed fine until my mum told us about us moving, and then very soon after that we came home and the stuff was being packed. So then we moved to this new house. I thought life was going to be good, I thought life was going to be great, especially when I saw the guy that I had a crush on, this guy, you know, like your teenage crush, and he lived down that area. I saw him there, so I was like, wow, you'd never guess who lives down there. So I was really excited about moving, and it wasn't until we actually moved and watching my parents, you know, just fall apart after the marriage, which really messed with my head, because I'd never been exposed to seeing my parents hurt. I'd never been exposed to seeing my parents cry, to see my parents angry, I'd never saw all of those emotions out of them. I'd always saw, you know, that lovely mum and dad that protect you. My dad became a very angry man, and my mum just became depressed, completely numb, shut down. She didn't really speak. She was just always by herself, just sad really, and she just gained so much weight, which probably didn't help the way she felt. But to me, it was just, okay, I can use this to my advantage and I can go out and I can do what I want. And that's when I began like sleeping with a guy that was, he was way older than me. I think he was probably about 10 years older than me, so I would have been about 14, and I think he was about 24, 25. And yeah, I lost my virginity to him, and I used to literally go to his house in my school uniform on the break, and I would go and see him, and then I'd go home to my parents arguing, the door being kicked, you know, shouting, screaming, very volatile home, and it became a place where I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be at either of their houses, because if I was with my dad, I'd feel bad that my mum was at home depressed, or I'd be worried that if she's okay. If I was at my mum's, my dad would say we were all about our mum, and he would feel alone, and he was having palpitations, he was going into hospital with anxiety attacks, and it just was too much for me, because I just lived such a sheltered life. And I just began like travelling around different family members' houses and just staying anywhere but at home. So I'd stay at one auntie's, then I would stay at my nan's, then I'd stay at my granddad's. I spent a lot of time with my nan and granddad, and then my granddad passed away, which I didn't take very well either. So at this age now, I was about 14 and I was just so mixed up, so mixed up. I started drinking with my friend. She had a lot of problems as well. She used to drink, you know, to to make herself feel better, and I did the same, and we'd literally be up in that bedroom up there drinking without my dad's knowledge. We'd be out on the streets. We started smoking weed, and yeah, I started selling weed for the guy that I was having sex with, and that's where I started to become troublesome. Up until the age I left school, that was my life. Skiving school, getting drunk, smoking weed, meeting boys, and having sex with a man twice my age. Sorry guys, I'm being attacked by flies. Sorry. Yeah, so basically why we're here is for me to let you know a bit about my church background. So I was christened in this church, Mount Olivet Apostolic Church. Started going here with my grandmother on weekends, probably from a baby. I don't even remember when I started going. I went here till I was about 12, up until the age where I spun out. And yeah, this is where I went to Sunday school. Growing up, I didn't really remember much about Jesus. I knew that he died for my sin. I knew that if we didn't choose to serve him and give our lives to him, that we'd go to hell. And that was as basic as my understanding was. So I grew up quite not really liking God, because I used to think, like, why would you make us to then threaten us with hell if we don't live according to what you want us to do? And that's the way I grew up. Like, I grew up with this understanding that being a Christian was about the clothes you wore. I grew up with an understanding that being a Christian was about the way you spoke. It was a very outward thing to me. Things like sex outside of marriage, things like, you know, hatred in your heart, unforgiveness, bitterness, the real issues that stop a man from going to heaven. I had no knowledge of that. You know, I just thought, you know, I was brought up to know that, you know, women don't wear women don't wear trousers, sorry. You only wear skirts and dresses. You're not allowed to whistle if you're a woman. You're not allowed to swear. You're not allowed to party. You're not allowed to listen to secular music because that's the devil's music. And you're not allowed to wear lipstick. You're not allowed to wear false hair. You're not allowed to wear earrings. You're not allowed to paint your nails. And that was what being a Christian was to me. That's what I grew up to understand of Christianity. I understood that Christians rebuke people, Christians judge people by the way they look and by the way they talk and by the way they dress. And a lot of other people would say to me, oh, that's not right, that's not right. So yeah, I grew up kind of rebellious to Christianity because I saw it as boring, I saw it as chains, I never saw it as freedom, never understood the love of God, I just understood the wrath and the judgment of God. So I cowered away from church. As soon as I got old enough to say, Mom, Dad, I don't want to go, I stopped going. But when I was very, very young, 6, 7, to probably about the age of 10, I remember that I did enjoy church and I did enjoy Sunday school. And, you know, my nan, she was a powerful instrument of this church. You know, she was actually the mother of this church. My grandma, she started off just witnessing on the streets, having choir practices, having Bible studies, and that's how this church formed. They found a preacher, they brought a building. They used to use first they'd use their house, my nan and granddad's house. Then after they'd use the house, they would use the school, not far from here. And then they finally brought this building where my granddad built the baptism pool. And, you know, my nanny's called Mother Williams in this church because she's the mother of the church. So my nan was very influential and she was a very powerful woman of God. You know, my granddad, he served, my nan served. The house was open to people. They were always cooking for people, housing people, helping people out financially, helping poor people in Jamaica. They did a lot of charitable deeds. They did a lot of good deeds. I used to go out evangelising with my nan when I was young. And I remember I used to preach on the street with her. And I remember, like, literally this woman walking down the road smoking, and I told her that God doesn't want her to smoke because God doesn't want her to die. That memory makes me think that I did kind of have an understanding briefly that God did love us, even though my memory doesn't remember that, because sometimes you only remember the bad. But I did obviously understand to some extent that God loved us, and that's why God didn't want us to smoke, because that's what I remember saying to the woman. And she put a cigarette out. I remember my nan going around and telling everybody how I'd preached, and this woman put out her cigarette, and I don't know if she gave her life to God after that, but my nan was overjoyed. And that was it. I used to live this life of preaching, and then I'd go home and go back to my dancing to the devil's music and my earrings and my this, that and the other. So I always felt like I lived a double life, that I was a Christian around my nan and I was a sinner when I was at home. And even my dad used to joke and say that, you know, look a Christian, what you listening to, what you dancing to, Christian not to do this, Christian not to do that. And that was it. Like, you know, my dad used to find it quite funny, but yeah, that was what I remember of church and Christianity as a child. Just a very vague understanding and just not a really deep understanding. Just it was very surface level. I'd never had a revelation of Christ, never experienced Christ. I just judged from the outside in. Okay, so this is where I went to school. This was my secondary school. Say from year 7, I was quite shy. Well, I'm not really a shy person, but I was just a bit nervous about starting secondary school. My big sister, she had a bit of a name here of being like a bad girl. She had a fight with some boy, kicked him down a bank, and he ended up going home in a stretcher. Well, going to hospital in a stretcher, shall I say. So I kind of lived off her reputation. So, you know, by the time I got to year 8, I was a big mouth. To be honest, I was always a bit of a bully from primary school. But once I'd kind of found my feet and big school wasn't so scary anymore, I started bullying people again. I started to act like I was bad. Really, I hadn't really had a fight. I was just all mouth. But I used to pretend that I'd had fights, and then eventually I did end up having a fight on the park by my house. And I remember I just had this girl in the headlock, and I was just punching her and punching her and punching her. And then my little sister, she was screaming and crying, and I think that was my first fight, and that was my only fight. But when I came here, I just acted like fighting was everything, that I'd always been fighting and stuff. Then my sister, she had trouble with some people. One day these guys came for us after school. One of them was waving a machete in the window, and he had a balaclava on his face. I'd say that that was really traumatic for me, you know, because I'd never seen anything like that before. So to come out of school and a guy's looking at my face, waving a balaclava, looking at me with a balaclava on his face, it scared the living daylights out of me. So after then, like, I was a bit more cautious of who I picked on, because I knew that my sister had got herself into this trouble through just literally having an argument with the wrong person. So I was a bit more careful in who I had arguments with. But my sister left school, and a girl that she had a problem with started to bully me. I went home and I told my dad, and my dad was just like, if she's bigger than you, then you can't fight her, you just get a brick and you just smash her head with it. So I was like, oh, okay. The rule here was you couldn't fight in your school uniform, so I decided I was going to get changed in that alley right there. I had some leggings and a belly top under my uniform, ripped them off, waited for after school, ready to smash her up with a brick. I think somebody told her and it didn't end up happening. The school couldn't do anything because I wasn't in my uniform. And so then that's where the trouble kind of began here. Then I started being cheeky to the teachers, I started getting in trouble, I was in detention all the time. Me and my friend Jade would just literally just rip the mick out of the teachers all the way through each class. School trips, I remember one school trip we went to a theatre, we got drunk. But surprisingly, I did all right on my GCSEs. I didn't do good, but I didn't do as bad as I thought I would do. I got like middle marks. That was my school life. So up until, I'd say, but probably around the times that my parents began to fall apart was about the times that I started to get really bad at school, started to get into a lot of trouble, every day in trouble. Then it started off that I wouldn't even come to school. You know, the alley that I recorded earlier, we'd all stand in there in the morning and smoke. The top courts that you saw, it's like a netball court that we shown at the beginning of this clip. That's where we used to smoke at lunch as well. And then it just became a thing where me and Jade would just stop going to school. I used to pretend to be my mum on the phone when the school phoned, and I'd just be like, oh, she's not well today. And then we'd just go around meeting lads, meeting that guy that was twice as old as me, smoking weed, getting drunk. And literally, like, we were just on the streets from then. And that's where I'd say that I started to become a bit of a road girl. A road girl is a bit of a girl that's on the street smoking weed, fighting, you know, a bit of a bad girl. And, you know, I always wanted to be badder than my sister, but I took it to a whole new level. And yeah, that's where things got bad. It wasn't long after I left this school where I started to rob people. I'd got a new boyfriend that was in a gang, and from there on, I just got worse. I started robbing people, started getting involved with drug dealers, and just started to live that life really. So that was up until about the age of 7. No, that was up until the age of 16. This is the ends. This is the bits. This was the place where I grew up from about the age of 14 upwards. So when my son was conceived, this was my ends. So yeah, pregnant, had my son. When my son was about 1, I moved to my own flat. When I got my own flat, so you have to watch around here. There's police now, because the thing is around here it's very rough. So the police, they've got cameras up here, and if they see anything that they think is strange, they kind of have to check it out. So sometimes I forget that I'm not gang anymore, so I don't need to watch the police anymore. But anyhow, back to the subject. Yeah, so my son was conceived here. Got my own flat when he was about 10 months. I did struggle without my mum there a bit, because when he was crying, I didn't know why he was crying. He wouldn't eat. He didn't like this, didn't like that. He was throwing his food up the wall. I just found it hard to just like kind of understand babies as much as I thought I did. But anyway, I managed to do the best that I could. And by this time, when I was living in this flat, my ex-partner, he got sent to jail. And by then I'd split up with him again, because we were always splitting up and back together. This is the same gang-related guy that I've been with since I was, 15? When I first started hanging about in West Bromwich, this was the guy. So yeah, me and him, we split up. So it was just me and my son really. I got with another guy, his family were quite notorious in Wolverhampton. But he was quite soft, to be honest. And he was really loving, he was really kind, he wasn't abusive. And I thought, like, this is the first time that I'm with someone that's not like repeatedly hurting me, someone that actually tells me I'm beautiful, somebody that actually makes me feel good about myself. You know, that I don't really have to have sex with him to feel like I'm wanted. Like, he makes me feel wanted anyway. He makes me feel like I'm worth something. And I really, really, really was attached to this guy. My son was attached to this guy. He moved in with us after a while, and then I found out that he was also cheating on me. He had a girlfriend and a child, and when he moved in with me, he had moved in with me and left them. She didn't take too kindly to that, so the one night I went out clubbing, and I was beaten up by her and about 20 other girls, literally ragged around the car park like a Cabbage Patch doll, and just kicked in. The next day my face was just swollen out here. It's the first time I've been beaten up actually, and I was beaten up like quite badly. Took months for the scars and the marks to disappear, and I wanted to retaliate. I was so angry, but before, like, I did go to do something, and then when we were outside the house, parked up, ready to run up in the girl's house and do whatever, I said, no, I don't want to do it anymore. My conscience got the best of me, and I decided that I wasn't going to go back for them. And the girl, she phoned, I think it was my sister or something, and my auntie spoke to her, and we just decided to let it go. But even still, I was still angry. My ex-boyfriend, he ended up getting locked up for selling drugs in Scotland, and so now both my ex-partners were in prison, both for selling drugs, and I was by myself again. So it was just me in my flat. Actually, before he got locked up, after we'd split up, I was in the flat on myself, and my boyfriend that I'd been with from 15, the gang-related guy from West Brom, he was locked up already, but the other guy hadn't been locked up yet. But we had split up and I'd not been beaten up yet at this point. I forgot about this bit. And I had some of my ex-partner's friends from West Bromwich come round to meet some of my other friends, because my flat was a bit of the cotch where everybody would come, everybody would drink, everybody would smoke, and if a guy was meeting a girl and I knew both of them, they'd just meet up in my flat because I was the only friend that had a flat. So my flat was like, everybody was young, so to have a flat, it was great. So everybody used to come to my flat. So they came to my flat, but they'd come to my flat after robbing someone on a bus. These guys didn't act too kindly to that, because what they had done was they'd stole the phone that that guy used to sell his drugs with. And when people were phoning that guy for drugs, they were meeting him. I don't even know if they got to meet the sales, but I know that somehow they had come off the bus after robbing him, and everybody knew, straight Brum guys, and they knew that I was associated with Brum guys, so it didn't take a genius for them to realise that these guys had come to my flat. So next thing you know, these guys run up in my flat, balaclavas, guns, kicked open the door. In fact, they didn't even kick open the door was open. They just pressed the handle, opened the door, came in. So I heard the front door. I came out the kitchen and I saw a big guy standing next to my son with a balaclava on. I looked down the corridor. There was just guys all the way down the corridor with balaclavas on. The guy standing next to my son, he pulled out a gun. Here's the police. I knew it. I knew they would come when they saw this. So the guy with the balaclava, he pulls out a gun next to my son. So I grabbed my son and I ran in the kitchen, and they just literally beat the guys, gun-butted the guys till they looked dead. When I came out of that kitchen, what was crazy was the fight actually came into the kitchen, and I was standing behind the kitchen door, and the door literally swung open and sandwiched me and my son in the corner because it stopped at the fridge. So we were safe and protected by this door. Only God could have made that happen, you know, but that I was standing in that position to just be protected. So this fight had come into the kitchen and knives had been pulled out, and it was just a big brawl in the house. All these men just beating these two guys. And once I heard them leave the flat, I came from out of the kitchen door. My son was screaming his head off. I've never heard a baby scream like that. He was petrified. So as that happened anyway, I came out of the flat and I literally just stepped over their bodies. I thought they were dead. I just stepped over their bodies. I looked, there was just blood everywhere, blood in the carpet, blood up the walls, blood on the sofas, blood everywhere. And I literally just took myself and came out the flat, and I went to my friend's flat upstairs. As I was going to my friend's flat upstairs, I saw some more guys coming back into the flat. So I was like, they're going to shoot them. They're just going to shoot them. They're just going to kill them. They're just going to make sure they're dead. And I was just like, oh my gosh. So then in my friend's flat now, we heard the doorbell, ding dong. And my friend was like, I'm not answering the door. I'm not answering the door. The door's locked. And then ding dong again. And then she went, who is it? And the guy goes, it's a surprise. And all we could see was his eyes through the letterbox, and she just literally got straight on the phone. She's like, I'm phoning the police. The police showed up like 3-4 hours later. And I was just like, by the time they came, I was like, why are you here? What's the point in coming now? We'd be dead by now if it was down to you. The other guys, I think they went in an ambulance. I can't remember what happened to them. When sometimes trauma just takes bits away from you, but I can't remember what happened to them, but they both survived anyway. And that was that. So with that, I had to move out of the flat. By then my mum had moved to a better area. Me and my son moved in with my mum. We lived there for a while. Then the second boyfriend got locked up. And then we literally stayed there until I moved to Whitmarines. Not Whitmarines, I moved to All Saints from there. So that was my life in Whitmarines, literally before I had my son. Before I got locked up, I was just robbing people, smoking weed, getting high, kissing boys, meeting boys, having sex with this guy in West Brom, being in a relationship with this guy in West Brom, travelling from house to house. That was my life here. My life here was just, I don't even know what to say to explain it. It was just a mess. I was just a mess. I was going nowhere, no job. Just selling weed, smoking weed, drinking, partying, being a mum, going to the park, cooking dinner, trying to find my worth in a guy. Nothing ever changed really. So that was my life at Marines, and this is where once upon a time I used to sit smoking my spliff, drinking a 2020. God makes me laugh that I could be back here, a whole different person. If only the walls had eyes and the trees had voices, they'd have a lot of stories to tell. Okay, yeah, so this is West Brom, and this is where, like I said, it all began really with this guy, and running away to be with him, turning my back on my family, telling my dad that I didn't want nothing to do with him, trying to survive on my own, robbing people, running up and down with drug dealers. I remember the guy that I was with one time, he had £20,000 in the back of the car, and me and my friend were like, oh my gosh, this guy's crazy rich, and we thought we had made it. We thought, like, you know, we felt powerful with these guys. We felt like we were the dons. We felt like we were, you know, these guys were our protectors. They, you know, we just idolised them. He was my idol for a long time, 15 years. I idolised this guy, but as time went on, he began to treat me worse and worse and worse. When I first got with him, he was always buying us stuff, buying us weed, buying us drink, anything that would get us to sleep with him anyway. And after a while, yeah, we did start sleeping with him, and my friend, she was with her guy, I was with my guy. They were cousins, and it was fun, it was exciting. You know, we got everything we wanted from these guys. We got status, we got everything. Just being young girls, this was my life. Turned my back on my family to be with him, and he became homeless in the process that I became homeless. So 2 homeless people. I don't know where his drug money went then. It obviously wasn't his, but yeah, all of that money that he had, and him and his cousin fell out. So at that time, me and him, we were kind of like each other's only person that we had, but he had other girls anyway, and I knew he had other girls, but because I just felt so worthless, like I didn't mind just being one of his girls, because I felt like if I was with him, I was something. I had it spoke over my life from a very young age that all a man would want me for was a slit in between my legs. That's a word what an older man in my family told me when I was about 13. So this guy, he told me the same thing. If you ever leave me, all a man's going to want you for is sex and your body. So it was something that I always believed, up until I got saved really, and I gave into that, and I used to use my body to try and get what I wanted out of men, and that's how my life was. I was with this guy, I was besotted with him, completely idolised him for 15 years of my life, trying to make it work, wishing that he would be faithful to me, hoping that he would be everything that I wanted him to be. And once I had just like kind of given into that, he could really do whatever he wanted to me, and he did. He was abusive, he was horrible to me, and in between I'd get the nice bits, in between he'd be kind, and that's what would keep me, just those nice sides to him that would make me want to stay with him. And that was my relationship with him. I've shown you All Saints, where I used to live. I've just shown you my house. So when I was there, I was in a bad place. I was heartbroken, continued to go into these destructive relationships. You know, I went into a new relationship just as destructive. Went back to my safety net relationship. That just brought me down even more. Got with another guy after that. He just finished me off, to be honest. Like the heartbreak, the depression, the feeling of just being lost and empty, and you know, it was just, I just reached the end, and life was just, I didn't even know why I was alive. It just come to a place of complete, utter darkness, and no smoking, no weed could take it away, no drinking could take it away, no partying could take it away. Nothing could heal my heart. I was just broken. I was just broken. I felt like the world had chewed me up and spat me out. You know, by this point, I'd had 2 abortions. I'd had men reject me, use me and reject me. You know, I'd started taking these party drugs, and at first it was all fun, but it just didn't take the pain away. One day I looked out of my bedroom window of that house that I showed you not long ago, and I said to God, I said, God, I know who I think you are. You're not that person. When I was in jail, I read a lot about God and I read the Bible, and the person I was reading about wasn't the person that I thought God was. And it was almost like at that moment I had a revelation that I needed God, and I said, God, I don't know who you are, but I know you're not who I thought you were, but I want you in my life. I want to know you. Lead me to a church that's going to teach me the truth about you. Lead me to a place where I'm going to be able to be me and still serve you as me, where I'm going to be accepted for who I am, where I can do the things I enjoy, where I can still dance, where I can still listen to music, where I can still be me. I don't want to dress in a way that I don't want to dress. I don't want to talk in a way that I don't want to talk. I want to be real. And if you accept me for who I am, let a church accept me for who I am. And that's when I found this place. The church is no longer here, but this is where the church was. This was the Potter's House Christian Fellowship in Wolverhampton, on top of a vehicle hire place. There used to be a vehicle hire building here, and we was at the top there where you see the windows. And this is where I first encountered Christ. After I prayed that prayer, I went to the town centre. Someone gave me a leaflet. Didn't think anything of it. Somebody tried to witness to me. I shut her down and told her I don't want to know. I saw a friend, an old friend, and she told me she had got saved, and I just looked at her clothes. I looked at her and I thought, you're not real, you're not saved. You don't look like you're saved. Not long after that, I saw her sister. I knew her sister from years ago, but I didn't know it was her sister because they were all in care at the time. And her sister was singing praise and worship with the church in town, the church that would later become my church. She gave me a leaflet, and I remember at this point thinking, is this the answer to my prayer? Is this the church that I asked God to lead me to? And I planned to go, and I was walking to the church and my heel broke and I couldn't find it, and I just thought, you know what, it's not meant to be. I'll just go to my uncle's church and I'll try again next week. So I went to my uncle's church, and for the first time my uncle told me that God had a plan for me. Didn't understand any of the sermon, didn't understand what they were talking about, but something sat on my heart when he said that God had a plan for me. And for once I believed him. I did think, oh, Christians say this stuff, but something inside of me believed that God did have a plan for me. So the following week I planned to go to this church, and I went to get my leaflet out the night before to plan to go. I got my little sister to come, and I was literally looking for the leaflet and it was gone. And I walked out of my kitchen so disappointed because I really thought that God had answered my prayer. And just as I sat down on the sofa thinking it's not meant to be, somebody walked past my living room window and posted that flyer through my front door. Through my front door they posted that flyer. That flyer that would then change my life. That flyer that would then lead me to God. And you know, sometimes when you're posting leaflets and you think that it's pointless, you're tired and you're fed up, it was somebody posting a leaflet that led me to Christ. It was somebody that posted a leaflet that saved my soul. It was somebody that posted a leaflet that Christ used to call me and draw me to the place that he had called me to. It was someone posting a leaflet that answered my personal prayers between me and God that nobody else heard. Somebody walking to my front door and putting that leaflet through, that same leaflet that I'd received time and time again after I'd prayed that prayer. At that point I knew. I came to the church, me and my sister. The pastor preached about going around in circles. He preached about blowing with the wind, and that's the place where I'd come to. I'd realised that I was going around in circles, destructive relationships, the same drugs, the same clubs, the same parties, the same everything, and it just wasn't satisfying. It wasn't doing anything. It would satisfy for the moment, and then I'd just go back to my life of pain, my life of emptiness, my life of struggle, trying to raise a child by my own, a rejected child and a rejected mum. And that's how I felt. I felt like I wasn't good enough to my family, or my family was successful. They had businesses, they had jobs. I was the one that got pregnant young. I was the one that went to jail. I was just a mess up. But for that moment when I encountered God, I felt like my life had purpose. And, you know, when my life was preached in that moment, I realised that God recognised me, that God saw me, that God knew what I was going through and God was speaking directly to me. And I knew that this is where I needed to be. I raised my hand to get saved. Little to my knowledge, when I got to the altar, I saw my sister there as well. We both gave our lives to Christ. This is where I first encountered Christ, and this is where my life began to change. So by this point now, I've left church and I've returned to the guy in West Bromwich, and I'm back here again in the same position again. His grandma had died and he said that he needed me, and I was at the point in church where I just thought, no Christian guys are going to ever want to be with me, and I desired a relationship more than I desired God at this point. And with my prideful ways of feeling that I deserved it and feeling let down by God, I just left and got back with this guy. He basically just used me for sex. He dangled a relationship like a carrot in front of a rabbit, and you know, he would just be like, I'll be with you, just hold on, just hold on, just hold on. In the meantime, he was just using me. He never did get back with me, and I ended up getting with someone else, which is what I told you about at the graveside, which is where I got pregnant and the baby died. After my daughter died, I just had nothing left at all, and I ended up back here again, back with this guy again after she died. And what was really strange is that because I'd agreed to grow weed for him, he was with me quite a lot, and I felt like our relationship was going somewhere, like was finally getting on. He wasn't being abusive to me, he wasn't speaking worthlessness over me. I'd had a bit more of a backbone now, and I had become like really close with his family. I was close with his family before, but when I went to church I kind of just distanced from all of them. But it's like once I'd come back, the relationships had just gone twice as tight, like with his family, with his aunties and stuff like that. So I really felt like, yes, we're a family. I've got everything I want now. I've always wanted a family. And he was like staying at mine nearly every night, until he basically cheated again. Well, I thought he did, but he didn't. But up until that point, I'd thought that he was being faithful to me, and you know, we were getting on, and it was the best our relationship had ever been, to be honest. And then I found out about a baby that he had. I knew the girl was pregnant, because he had got her pregnant when he wasn't with me. And literally, I found out this girl had a baby, but I already knew she was going to have the baby. But then she started to tell me that he wanted to be with her, and he was saying all this stuff to her. I literally just flipped, phoned the police, got an injunction on him because he was at that point being abusive. He was ready to leave the girl and say to the girl he didn't want to see the kid and all this stuff. And I just knew that that wouldn't last, that he was just doing that to keep me for that moment, and eventually he would end up getting back with the girl. So just to end it once and for all for good, I knew that if I phoned the police on him, he would never get back with me, because on the streets that's just something you never do. You never phone the police on anybody, you never get the police involved. And I did that because I knew that if I did that it would end things. So my mental health began like deteriorating again after I'd split up with him. I had to move house. I just had no worth left at all. He had sent a video out of me to like loads of friends that I knew where I've like literally got no clothes on, so I was just shamed. There was nothing more that could be taken from me. I felt like my body was a failure because my baby had died. I felt like, you know, just shameful because of what he had done to me. And by that point I just started sleeping around. I just started taking cocaine. I just literally went completely off the rails. I was rubbish mum through this period. I was just all about money, drugs, guys and all of that stuff. And that was my life, you know, that was my life after me and him split up. I mean, I was still close with his family. One night me and the gang, we were in West Bromwich, and some guys just ran in the club and started beating the guy with a chair. The chair broke into pieces, his head was burst open, we had to take him to the hospital. There was another time we went to another club, and just we were told like, guys, it's not your night. The opposite gang was in the club. Came outside the club and I was absolutely drunk out my face, but they were just shooting at us, about 5, 6 men just shooting at us, shooting at the cars. And I was that drunk, I was just laughing my head off in the back. But, you know, when I come back to Christ, I realised, like, God, you really kept me, because I could have died. I really could have died messing about with these gangs, messing about on these streets, you know, just looking for status, looking for validity in the streets, looking for, I don't know, what I needed was God, but I was trying to find everything that God gave me in these streets, and streets don't show, you know, love, man. They never will. Definitely didn't show me none. Yeah, literally just ruined my life. Ruined my life. Literally, like that prodigal son that spent all he had and was left with nothing. That's where I'd come to. That's where this place took me to. So you're probably wondering why I'm in a cemetery. Um, I'll go into it. So I'll pick up where we left off, which was that I'd left church and I was pregnant, and I'd left church to be with the guy from West Bromwich. Within a few weeks, I realised things wasn't going to work out because he had a girlfriend. Um, so I gave up hope with that, and I literally just got with this guy that I knew like years before. Um, the guy that I knew years before, we were just friends, but I literally knew that I wanted a baby. It was one of the reasons I left church. I wanted a family. Things didn't work out with the guy that had raised my son. That family situation didn't work out, so I'd like come up with the idea that I was going to make my own family. Um, that's when I got with this other guy that I knew from the past, and in my head I literally just wanted to be pregnant and have a baby. Even if he left me, I still wanted the baby because I felt like that baby was what I needed at the time, that I just wanted to be a mum again. And I felt like I wouldn't get that at church. I felt like, you know, no man's going to want a woman with a child, no man's going to want me. God isn't going to give me a man, otherwise he would have gave me one already. And I just let it consume like my whole thought pattern, and I left. And after my failed attempt of getting pregnant with my ex-partner, I thought I would try a whole new family situation with a guy that I knew was a good dad. Um, so we ended up fornicating after we went to watch um, women's football at the Rico Arena. I think it was a part of the Olympics in 2012. Yeah, we went there, and after that I had in my head I'm going to seduce him and hopefully I can get pregnant. And what was really crazy is that I actually did get pregnant. And you know, I think in my head I thought that I'd outsmarted God, and I thought, like, you know, I'm going to get everything I want. He decided he didn't want a child with me. He told me to get rid of the kid. He doesn't want to be a dad again and all this stuff, but I didn't really care what he wanted because it was never about him. It was all about me and what I wanted. And I got pregnant, and yeah, he wasn't around. And then about 4 or 5 months into my pregnancy, he came back around on the scene, and he was there every night. And I felt like in my heart, I've got my family, I've got everything that I've wanted, I've won. And when I was about 6 months into my pregnancy, I started to feel her kick. I was so excited for her to come. My son, he was so excited for her to come. My whole family were excited for her to come. We enjoyed going to her scans. My mum, my sisters, they all came to her scans with me. And I remember on Christmas Day was the first time I'd felt her kick properly. Yeah, Christmas Day was the first day that I felt her kick properly, and everybody was feeling my stomach, and we were all excited. 2 days before that, I'd had a bleed, and I'd gone into the hospital with what I thought was contractions. The hospital sent me home and said that the bleed, it was nothing to worry about. Then 4 days later, which was 2 days after Christmas, I went into labour in my house. I remember just being asleep on the sofa, feeling really tired that day. I'd had sickness and diarrhoea, so I was just really drained. I had a really bad pregnancy anyway, so I was always in and out of hospital. I was throwing up non-stop. It was an awful pregnancy, and I was bleeding on and off all the way through. And this particular day, I was just tired. I was just drained. I was fed up, and I remember my partner at the time, he offered to get me something to eat because he could see I wasn't well. He went and got me some food for my breakfast. I ate that, and then I went to sleep. My son was with my sister because she knew I wasn't well. About I slept for a few hours, woke up about 5 in the evening, and I went to the toilet, and I realised that I was bleeding again. So I walked to my bedroom, and as I walked to my bedroom, I remember I had this really sharp pain, but it was the type of pain that you feel that isn't right. So I thought I need to phone the ambulance. So I went to get my mobile, which was dead. I'd left my charger over Christmas at my auntie's, so I couldn't charge the phone. So I had to basically get my house phone out of the cupboard and unravel it. So I'd got the phone, and I got in the kitchen to plug it in, and as I got to the kitchen to plug it in, I got another pain, and then I literally felt my daughter come down, and I knew right now that she's ready to come out, and I just pushed, and this baby, little tiny baby, she was about that big, she came out in my hands. I was just so shocked. I didn't know what to expect. There was just blood everywhere, and I just remember saying, God, please don't let her die. God, please don't let her die. Please, God. And I was just literally begging God, don't let her go, don't let her go. And I finally got through to the ambulance, and I remember I was holding her here because she was still attached to the cord, and the cord was still attached to me, so I couldn't really move, and I just had her like that, and I had the phone in the other hand, and the ambulance were asking me, is she alive? And I was just like, I don't know. I think I was just screaming frantic down the phone, and then I felt her move, and I just had this joy inside of me to know that she wasn't dead. And I said, she's moved. They asked me to breathe for her. They asked me to keep her wrapped up, keep her warm. The first ambulance came, they said she was dead. But at that point, she had moved again, so I knew she wasn't dead, and I refused to take what they had said, and they told me that I needed to push out my placenta or I was going to die. I said, well, I'll die then. You get someone else here to check my baby, or I'm not going to push it out. I will die, literally. So another ambulance came, and they said they felt a slight pulse. So they took her straight to the hospital. I remember ringing my mum and telling my mum what had happened. My mum was just panicked. I don't know how my pastor knew. I don't know if I phoned him. I just don't remember everything. um, and I literally had to lie down on my living room floor and push out my placenta because they said that it was going to go septic, I was going to die. But then my cervix had closed because I'd left it so long. So they ended up rushing me into hospital to have emergency operation to have my placenta removed. As soon as that was done, all I did the whole time I got there, as soon as I got to the hospital, I saw my pastor there. I saw another pastor from our fellowship there. I remember just seeing them standing in the hallway, and at that point, I don't know what happened. I just remember seeing them, and then I just remember like just holding cord, this this cord that was just hanging, and I went in for my operation. They removed my placenta. The whole time through it, I just wanted to know where my baby was. I just wanted to know if my baby was okay. I just kept asking them. They said they needed to put me to sleep for the operation. I said, no, I'm not going to sleep. You're going to have to do it whilst I'm awake, because as soon as it's done, I want to see my baby. So they literally just sedated me and numbed me from the waist down. They did the operation, and as soon as it was done, I said, I want to see my baby. They said, we can't take you down until the sedative wears off, basically, the anaesthetic, whatever they call it, until that wears off. And I was just like, no, I want to go there now. If you don't take me there now, I'm going to throw myself off this bed and I will drag myself there. So they ended up taking me down on my hospital bed, and for the first time I saw my daughter. 2 weeks before this, my best friend had died, my best friend from school. I think probably the stress of that has caused me to go into labour. So I was already grieving, and I was already broken, and I was already ill, and now I had this to deal with, and my brain just couldn't take it. Like I just couldn't, I couldn't handle everything that was happening, and it was all happening so fast, and everything was just, it just seemed like everything was happening, and I was just there watching it. And then that moment where I looked at my daughter for the first time, well, for the second time, because I'd seen her at my house when I gave birth on my own, um, just looking at her in that hospital, attached to all these tubes in the incubator, it was like none of the tubes existed, the incubator didn't exist, the nurses didn't exist. All that I could see was my daughter, and I instantly loved her. Like, it wasn't the same as with my son, where I had to get it round my head that I'd had a baby. I just looked at her and just loved her, and that was it. I just wanted her to live, and I just remember praying and praying and praying and phoning people at church and asking them to pray for her. My best friend literally being with me because I wasn't sleeping. I couldn't sleep because I just wanted to be awake every minute, because I didn't want to miss a second with her if she was to pass away. So it came to the second day, and we christened her. I made my pastor and my best friend her godparents. Pastor christened her. Her name was Ocean Zoe Williams. Her dad never came to see her in the hospital. He more or less saw that as his way out. So I couldn't even deal with that situation. My dad was really angry about it. My pastor was just really feeling bad for me that this guy had done this to me and put me in this situation, and kind of not even shown up. And pastor felt a lot of compassion for me, but I just couldn't focus on that. All I could focus on is the fact that my daughter was there. She started to have seizures. She fitted for 12 hours. That night they told me that I needed to sleep, because this was like going on to the second night now. They gave me sleeping tablets, and my mum and dad promised that they would stay with her and they wouldn't leave her, and if anything they would call me. I was just a mess, because I was just breaking down, just watching my baby in pain, watching my baby have a seizure, watching my baby literally fall apart, knowing she had a bleed on the brain, just the stress of it. I just cried and I cried and I cried and I cried. And my best friend, she stayed in the hospital with me all night and just held me as I cried. She spoke the word into me as I cried. And the next day, I went down, she was still fitting. She was still having a seizure. I asked if this had been going on all night. They said yeah. And I just remember that minute saying to God, I don't want to keep her here if her life's just going to be pain and her life's just going to be misery. And if that's going to be her life, God, I want you to take her. So I decided I was going to switch off the life support and let God decide whether she would live or die. I said, God, if it's your will for her to live, once I take this life support off, she will live. If it's not your will for her to live, I know that she's going to be with you, and there's no better place for her to be than with you. And I remember just thinking to myself that at least I'll know that one of my children's in heaven. So I just made that decision to commit her life to God and to God's will. And I told them to switch off the life support. All of my family came. There was probably about 30 of us in the room. I had about half an hour with her on myself where I just sung praise and worship songs to her. And then they removed the tubes, they removed the life support, and we just brought her into the room with the family, and we just passed her around and sang to her as she slipped away into eternity. And that's when I said goodbye to her. And then after that, I just literally fell apart. Like, I just fell apart. There was moments where I just didn't speak. I just stared into space. There was moments, I don't think there was an hour that went by for the first week where I didn't cry. I don't think there was a minute where I didn't feel just completely torn apart. Like, I'd never felt a pain like it. I didn't even know that a pain like that could exist. And I remember just the grief being so much that my body would literally shake, and the pain being so much to bear that my whole body would shake. And I started to drink alcohol. I tried to go back to church, and I tried to, seek God, but I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't feel anything to love God. I couldn't feel anything to connect with God. I couldn't feel anything. And, I remember bringing my whole family to church. I think it was probably the day after she'd come out, we'd left the hospital without her, and I just broke down in church, and I couldn't be there because I was just shaking, and I was just completely broken down. And my family took me out. I told my son about her dying. He just screamed, and he just resented me. He hated me. He didn't want to be with me. He said it was my fault. He didn't understand. He was just a child. Even he asked, where is he? Where's her dad? And, I had to say he's not here. And then I just remember drinking. And then my ex-partner that I'd been with when I lived in my flat, he knew her dad. So I reached out to him for support, and he ended up taking advantage of that and just literally sleeping with me. And I didn't care if he was using me for sex. I just needed someone there in the middle of the night when I woke up crying. I needed someone to hold me, and he did support me, and he was there for me. And all the times when I was drinking, he was there making sure that I didn't get myself into any dangerous situations. And then he asked me to marry him, and I said no. And then I was just so confused and just so lost and just so broken. And there was this guy just taking advantage with me and messing with my head. And after a few months of that, I let him go, because it was a secret and no one could know, because my family would have been absolutely fuming if they knew that I got back with him. So I just started drinking, and that's when I got really out of control in my sin. That's when I just didn't care about myself anymore. I just got to the point where money can't break my heart, and if I'm with any man, I'm not going to take them seriously. I'm going to cheat on them, I'm going to use them, I'm going to use them for money, I'm going to use them for whatever I can get, because that's what they've always done to me. And it was almost like I'd come to this place of payback. I made a load of friends that liked to drink, so that I would have people to drink with. I made friends that sniffed cocaine, so I'd have people to sniff cocaine with. I made friends that were all about money and working in strip clubs and doing anything they could do to get money. And I made friends in those circles. I got close with people that would teach me and show me how to grow cannabis so I could make more money. And my whole life just became about money and guys and sex and cannabis and using people and lying, and I just lived a wicked life. And in between all of the parties and being high, I'd be depressed and I'd be low. The doctors then diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder. I was then diagnosed with severe depression, and then finally I was diagnosed with personality disorder to do with my moods just going up and down. I spent months at my mum's house. I spent months at my dad's house because I wasn't even capable of looking after myself, never alone me and my son. Um, by the time I went home, I just got addicted to sleeping tablets and I would just sleep all day and I would just drink every night, anything to just numb the pain. I would smoke weed from the minute I opened my eyes in the morning. I'd have a shot of vodka the minute I opened my eyes in the morning, and I would take my sleeping tablets so that by the time I dropped my son to school I would just be conked out until it was time to pick him up, and then I'd pick him up, and between 3:30 of picking him up and about 8 o'clock when he went to bed, I would act like everything was normal, and then when it got to 8 o'clock, between those times I'd be depressed, I'd be low. When it get to 8 o'clock, I would do my ritual again: sleeping tablet, vodka, alcohol, and I would smoke weed until I fell asleep again. And that was my life for about 6, 7 months, and then started the partying, then started the cocaine, then started the medication from the doctors, and the concoction that I was on just made me even more crazy. And it wasn't long before social services got involved because they thought I wasn't capable of looking after my son. I tried to take tablets, ended up in hospital with overdose. I don't even know if I wanted to die. I don't even know if I wanted to live. I just wanted people to know the pain that I was feeling and the extent that my pain was so bad that I wouldn't care if I would die, and I wanted people to know that. And even though my family were around me trying their best to support me, to me nobody understood. To me nobody felt what I felt, and to me I was still alone because nobody understood what I was going through. And in those brief moments where I would accept Ocean's death, I would then grieve for my best friend, and it was just so much grief and so much darkness and so much heaviness and so much pain and just so much death and pain just overcoming my whole life, that all I could do was drink, smoke, party, sleep with guys, get into relationships, use guys. Got into some really dangerous relationships. I got in a relationship with a guy that was a radical Muslim. I don't even know about that guy, what became of him, but I managed to get away from him. I ended up getting with another guy who, once once I'd give my life back to God, I think it was about 2 weeks later, I saw an article in the newspaper about him, that he had tortured a girl for 3 days and beaten her and raped her and done all manners of evil to a girl. And that was the type of guys that I was meeting. I was with another guy when I got saved. That guy put witchcraft on me. He was controlling. He used to take all of my money. At that moment, my plan of taking money off guys and using guys had turned around on me, and he was now doing it to me, and I wasn't in control. I just needed him there. He made me feel, I don't know what he made me feel, if he just occupied me, I don't know what it was, but I used to let him take all my money. At one point he even had my bank card and would withdraw money whenever he felt like it and wouldn't let me spend my own money. I paid for him to go on holiday, and yeah, he just used me. And when I came back to Christ, he was like the devil. He was the one saying to me, you can't make it, you can't do it, you can't be a Christian, how can you be a Christian and you drink? And he was just always condemning me and making me feel like I couldn't do it. And he put people on the phone to me that were doing witchcraft chants to me. And, you know, I came to that night at the club, and I'll go on to tell you what happened from there, but that was my life once I'd left church. Just pain and grief, sadness, disappointment, and drugs and alcohol and parties. I even went to a whole different country with a whole coach load of people that I didn't know, and just drank loads, got high, dancing and doing all the stuff that I did. And that was life outside of Christ. That's where backsliding took me. And you know, you never know when you leave Christ how far your sin's going to take you, because everything I said I would never do and everything I thought I would never do, I became. So you don't know what life will do with you if you step outside of the grace of God. And I just plead to anybody that if you're feeling as though there's anything better in the world, it's a lie. The devil will dangle it in front of you. He will dangle everything that you want in front of you. And when you go out and get it, those very things will be the things that break you down. And you know, you're safer. There's nothing that compares to being in a relationship with God. no desire that is greater, that can satisfy, that can do what God does for you. Yeah, so I gave my life to God. I was around 21. This is our new church building now. We stepped up in the world. But yeah, so I gave my life to God. When I first came back to church, when I first came back to church from being a child, experiencing a whole new relationship with God, experiencing an actual relationship with God, getting to know God, being acquainted with God. You know, how else to explain it? You know, just being reunited to my God, you know, for the first time, actually really knowing him and actually really having a relationship with him and actually really experiencing him. This was the first time I'd ever actually encountered God. I knew God, I knew of God, but I never had a relationship with God. And that was the difference, that when I made this commitment at that altar, something changed in my heart. The Holy Spirit began to live and breathe in me, and that's where my life began to change. You know, I came to church broken, heartbroken, lost, afraid, addicted to drugs. In the world, I always needed a man to make me feel like I was worth anything, and all those men did was take my worth from me even more. You know, I was seeking worth in a place that was taking it. You know, when we're blind and we're lost, we can look for validation and hope and fulfillment in places that will do nothing but strip us of it, and we don't even see it. You know, we live for temporary gratification, and all it does is break us down even more when we come back to reality. And that was my life, and I came to church as that person, broken and lost, and you know, I didn't realise my state to the extent that it was at the time. But you know, God being a good God, he began to restore me, and he began to change my life, to change my heart. You know, my desire for a man literally went straight away. I no longer needed a man. God had filled that space in my heart, and God was the ultimate fulfillment. Like, no man could ever please me the way that God did. Men would let me down, men would break my heart, men would cheat on me, men would treat me badly, men would abuse me, and God was just love. And for the first time, I knew and understood the love of God, and I just basked in it. Like, I was just amazed. I was on fire for God. I was full of zeal, and you know, I was on outreaches. I would witness to every person I would see. Even at work, I refused to listen to the music that they were playing on the radio, and I used to try and praise and worship in the reception area. Wisdom lacking, obviously, and a lot of zeal, and I just had no filter, and I did bring a lot of people to Christ. You know, God had used that zeal and that passion to reach the lost, and I think it was probably around 36 people I brought to church in that time. I think something like that. I might have brought the number up a bit or down a bit, but I think it was something like 36 people, or 16, very big difference, but between 16 and 36 people, I would say, I brought to church in that first year, because I remember the pastor speaking about it during the conference, that between me and my sister, we had brought a large amount of people. So, you know, I was spreading the word, I was on fire, I joined the praise and worship team, I was on the outreaches, my life was just drastically changing. I got my first proper job, I passed my driving test. You know, I was whole, I was just made complete by God, and I loved my life. I was dancing and doing dancing during church concerts. I was singing during church concerts. I was being who I was, and I was loving life. I was loving who I was. I had a great relationship with my pastor. I built amazing friendships in the church, you know, friends that I still have to this day, people that genuinely loved and cared for me. And I never had this. You know, my thoughts of friendship was, we do the same stuff, we enjoy the same stuff, and that was friendship. Like, we just did what we liked to do, and if you didn't want to do what I wanted to do, I would find a friend that would. But these friends, they're just like taught me the real truth of friendship, loving each other, accepting people for who they are and even with their faults. And I remember I used to invite people to church, and so invite people to my house, people from the church. I'd invite them for dinner, and I would say to them, "Oh, do you want to come for dinner?" And I'd be like, "Oh, just 1 minute," and I would go and smoke my spliff in the garden. And they just loved me and accepted me and just prayed for me and allowed God to bring me to that place of, this isn't right, because I was smoking weed for a good 10 months, I think, whilst I was in church, and I hadn't felt like stopping yet. I was still drinking. I wasn't getting drunk, but I was drinking, and I never felt like there was anything wrong with that. And people just allowed God to do what he needed to do in me in his time. They never pressured me. They never told me anything. You probably get the odd comment here and there where you're still smoking, because people would have thought I'd stopped because I was so spiritual to their knowledge. But it wasn't until I stopped smoking weed, and when I'd stopped smoking weed, that's when I went into ministry. And I think a part of me just stopped smoking weed because I wanted to be in ministry. I don't think that I'd had that complete revelation of, God loves me and he doesn't want me to kill myself. I don't think I had that revelation. I just did it because I wanted to be in praise and worship. And I think a part of me wanting to be in praise and worship at that time was to fill my ego, to make me feel spiritual, to make me feel more of a part of the church, to make me feel like, I've made it kind of thing. I didn't really understand the importance of ministry or any of that. Everything was kind of face value. I would go for periods without praying, and I'd think, oh, it's okay, I'll pray tomorrow. And after a while I realised I was praying over the same issues time and time and time again. And I think like over the years, I think probably about my third year into my salvation, is where I started to struggle. And I started to struggle with things that I used to struggle with in the past. And even though God had helped me in so many ways and changed me in so many ways, even in me starting to pay tithe, I remember one time I had £200 and it was all I had. And I remember feeling like God was challenging me to put that last £200 that I had into the offering. I put that £200 in the offering in faith, and I literally had to borrow money after to survive for the week for me and my son. And literally every wage I had after that, I had an extra £200 on top of it for probably 3 months, 4 months. I had this extra £200 on top of my wages, and I was like to my work, what is this? They were like, it's tax back. For some reason they were paying my tax back. So God was faithful and God came through, and I knew that God was God. And God used to speak to me. I had a great relationship with God at times, and then I would have times where I'd drift away from God. And in those times where I drift away from God, I used to have feelings of just inadequacy and feeling like God didn't love me anymore, feeling like I just wasn't good enough and I had to do more things. And I was very much about works. I need to do more to get closer to God. God's drifted away from me, and very immature in my understanding. But at the time I didn't think I was immature. I thought I was very mature. I thought I was full of wisdom. I was very prideful. And then over the years, it was like I started to see everybody getting married. And I was just like, well, why am I not getting married? And I thought I was so perfect. I was like, why would no one want to marry me? Like, I'm in the ministry, I do this, I do that, I'm here, I'm great. Like, I felt I was great. And I was like, why is nobody marrying me? And my son, his skin condition got worse. He has vitiligo, and his pigmentation was just going rapidly. And I was just like, what is happening? Like, God, I don't deserve this. And from a very prideful heart, I was just like, how dare God do this to me when I've served him, when I've done this and when I've done that. And I'll speak to anybody that if you're in that place, it's a very dangerous place to be in, because God doesn't owe you anything. God gave his life on the cross. That's enough. Anything else we get, we're lucky. And I didn't understand that because I didn't really understand grace to the extent of grace. Well, you can never fully understand grace, I don't think, but I never understood that I didn't deserve it. I felt like I did, and I think that's where the problem was. So then after a while I was just like, with this prideful heart, comes the mighty fall, doesn't it? And I became very prideful, very inside bitter, feeling like I deserve started to talk to my old boyfriend again, and my pastor then, he got sent to a different church, and we had a new pastor and his wife. I knew them, but I didn't know them very well. They came into the church as I was struggling, and I didn't really have that relationship with them, so I wasn't really receiving from them like I would my old pastor, not excusing my behaviour because my heart was jacked up by this point. And I just remember just saying to God, either you get me a man or I'm going to go get my own man. There's plenty of men that will want me in the world. And I remember just having that heart towards God, and basically it was a bad thing to do. It was a very bad thing to do. And not long after that, a lady in the church, she came to me and she told me that God had spoke to her and told her to tell me that he won't be mocked. And I think that was a word that would stick with me forever, because at that point I'd started to fall into fornication, and I was fornicating with my ex-partner. Not long after that I was pregnant, and I left church, and that's when my life started to fall apart drastically. The point that I've come to now was my best friend was dead, my baby was dead, nearly been shot on an occasion, been abused some more, been raped, sexually assaulted. There was just nothing left. I had no worth, felt unlovable, my mental health was deteriorating, been diagnosed with depression, diagnosed with personality disorder, diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Just, I don't even know words that can explain how I felt, just empty and numb. Just started to try cocaine, it wasn't working. Tried all these different things, all these different relationships, and came to the same conclusion as before, but only now I didn't feel like I wanted to know God. I felt like I hated God. I felt like I blamed him for my daughter's death. I blamed him for everything, and all I could think is God won't be mocked. So I thought, God doesn't want to be mocked, so God's mashing up my life. I wasn't really taking the responsibility for the things that I had done. I was blaming God for it. But God was merciful and God was gracious, and I remember saying a prayer and saying to God, when I finally came to that place of humility and I'd surrendered that I know it all, and I just remember saying to God, I said, God, you're the one that knows everything. I don't know everything, and I do hate you. And I said to God, but I know that I hate you because I don't understand. I don't understand. That's why I hate you, and I just need you to help me. I need you to help me to love you again. I need you to help me to get past this. And God is just so good, because by this time I was working in a very nasty club, what do they call it, exotic club, trying to put in nice words, basically a strip club. I didn't have no worth, so taking my clothes off for a living was nothing. So I began working there, started taking cocaine, as I've told you this already, so you know the point that I was at. But funny enough, I went to church after saying that prayer, and I think there was a revival. These times I had the weed growing in my house, and I really wanted to give my life to God. And I remember saying to the revival pastor, I says to him, I really want to give my life to God, but I'm involved in you know what. And he was just like, get rid of it. I was like the sorrowful rich man in the Bible, because I went away sorrowful because I loved money too much and I wasn't trying to get rid of it. So I went back to that life, and slowly but surely as time went on, my heart began to yearn for God again, but I just didn't feel like I wanted to give my life to God, because now it seemed like things were going good. I had lots of money, I had a boyfriend, and to me everything was great, even though I was still depressed and everything like that. But to me, money and holidays made it better. Until one night I went back to church again, I think a few months later, and I really wanted to get saved again. And I think that in my heart and in my own words, I said a prayer. I don't think I went to the altar. I'm not sure, I probably did. And I made a decision to give my life to Christ again. But at this point, I said, God, I want to be saved and I want to give my life to you, but I know that I love money too much. And you know what? It's just really good to be honest to God. You don't have to lie to him. He knows who you are. He knows what's in your heart. He knows what you're thinking. So being honest to God really works because he helps you to do better. So I was just like, God, I really want to serve you. I really love you. But the problem is I love money too. And I can't stop doing this job because I love money. And I can't split up with this boy because he makes me feel loved. I need you to help me break this soul tie with this man and do something to make me not want this job anymore. I went to work that same night and got sacked. By then I was high on coke and I just wanted to party. So I just said to myself, I'm going to go to the club and I'm going to get drunk and I'm going to just spend all of my money. So luckily I saw some friends, otherwise I'd have been in a bit of a dangerous situation out of myself. Paid for them all in the club, literally high as a kite. Took so much cocaine that night. Took diesel, I was sucking the balloons. I was just on so much drugs. And I remember I met this guy and we went to his car to do some more cocaine. And as we were about to take the cocaine, I remember as clear as day, the Holy Spirit spoke to me and the Holy Spirit said to me, if you keep living this life, you are going to die in your sin. And it was just sobering because even though I was on drugs and even though I was drunk and even though I was under the influence of how many things, the Holy Spirit still spoke to me and I heard it. And I told the guy in the car what the Holy Spirit said to me, and he said to me he felt the same way and that his parents were pastors of a church. I said to him, promise me that you're going to go to church tomorrow because I have to go to church tomorrow. And he said he would. So then we went back to the club and I said to him so stupidly, I said to him, well, this is the last time we're going to go out, so let's have the best time ever. And we took as much drugs as we could and we just went out and we partied till 12 o'clock in the afternoon the next day. By then, of course, I'd missed the church service, but I was determined to go because I knew what the Holy Spirit said to me and I was not trying to go to hell. So I literally just went to sleep for a few hours, took myself to church. I think I'd just changed my clothes. I hadn't had a wash. I hadn't got changed. I was still smelling of alcohol. I was still a bit high. And I literally went to church that day and I gave my life to God. And my life has never been the same again. You know, God has just done so much. I remember like just writing in my book how much I hated myself, how horrible I thought I was. You know, these feelings of lowness. I remember being on countless calls to my pastor's wife, telling her that I didn't want to live. I hated my life. You know, I was just depressed. I was a mess. And, you know, God taught me what my worth was. You know, the more I meditated on who God said I was, the less I believed who the world had taught me that I was. The more that I meditated on God's word, the more I was restored. Within a few weeks, this guy, he was gone. Within a few weeks, the drugs, they were gone. Within 6 months, all of the medication they put me on for these mental health disorders, they were gone. And I was fine. I had peace, I had happiness, I had joy. And, you know, God began to change my life in a massive way. And I experienced God like never before, you know. All the way through it, God was speaking to me, God was leading me, God was speaking life into me, speaking his love into me, and just the way that God had touched my life, I had never experienced God like this, and my heart was in a place to receive it. And it's like now my understanding of grace, my understanding of God's love, my understanding of who God is, it's just completely at a whole new level to where it was before, because I know I don't deserve it. And I know out of every sinner, I was probably the worst. I've been that prideful Christian. I've been that judgmental Christian. I've been that broken person. I've been that grieving person. I've been through so much, and to stand here sane, clothed in my right mind, and it's only by the grace of God. Like, my life is completely different. I am completely different. Like, I'm not the same. You know, the word of God, you know, it's as much alive today as it was 2,000 years ago. Jesus, who died on that cross, he did not just die, he died and he rose again so that we could overcome. And because of that, I'm here today. And because of that, I am who I am today. And no longer do I credit that to myself, because it's not me, it's God. And who I am, my relationship with my son, as a mother, I'm a better, as an employee, I'm better, as a church member, I'm better, as a friend, I'm better. Everything that I've ever been, I am now better, and I am better because of Christ. And as I grow in the faith, I'm becoming better and better. I'm learning more, I'm becoming more selfless, I'm beginning to live for other people, I'm beginning to understand what really loving people is. I'm beginning to learn what being selfless is, and how important it is to love other people and help other people. And, you know, when other people need help, to be that person to help them, to be that person to uphold them. Because there was a time when I was alone. There's a time when I had everybody around me, but I still felt alone. There was a time when nobody was there, where I would cry in the middle of the night with grief, where I'd have flashbacks and there was nobody there to comfort me. And because of those things, because of the things I've experienced, I have such a heart for people. I have a heart that loves people with everything that I have, because I've been through so much. And I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't even take back the grief that I've been through. I wouldn't take back those 3 precious days that I spent with my daughter. I wouldn't take back the grief that I had to endure. I wouldn't take back everything that hurt me and everything that broke me, because God used those same things for good. God used everything that broke me down to make me who I am, and to make me better, and to make me understand, to make me love, to make me give me a revelation of who He is, who His grace is. I would not be here today if it had not been for all of those things and God, you know. And all I can say to anybody is, if you have not experienced God, you really, 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 the Bible says, taste and see that the Lord is good. Just try. And I tell you something, He'll blow your mind. You know, God will prove Himself to you. God will show you who He is. And He really is all who He says He is. He will heal every broken part of your heart. He will bring such a peace in your mind that you've never felt before, that you can go through storms. Even whilst I'm saved, I've had rough times whilst I'm saved. I've had bad things happen to me whilst I'm saved. But the difference is that I have a strength inside of me that comes from God, that helps me to overcome every obstacle. I have a peace in the midst of the most craziest of circumstances. And, you know, I'm now into my 2nd year of university. I'm going into my 2nd year. I never thought I would ever even be able to do anything like that. But you know what? Through Christ, all things are possible. You know, I'm a part of my church. I'm a part of ministries in my church. I get along with literally everybody here. I have good relationship with everybody in my church. I don't have any quarrels with anyone. I don't have any qualms with anyone. You know, my life is great, and I wouldn't change anything for the world. Like, serving God, giving my life to God was the best thing I could have ever done, because God has made me whole, and I just really look forward to all God's got in my future, because I can't even imagine how things can get better. Like, I'm happy, like, I've got joy, like, I'm just like living life, and life is great. Like, I'm getting to see the world. I've been to Dubai, I've been to all these different countries, and I've also got to just have that time with God, and nothing compares to having time with God, just communing with God, just worshipping in the secret place, praying in the secret place, growing in my spiritual walk, growing in my knowledge of God, growing in my knowledge of His word. Just everything that God is doing in my life right now is just blows my mind. And, you know, I'm just thankful. That's my testimony.